Atticus was diagnosed with asthma, so that meant he couldn't do much vigorous exercise or activities. He was nervous that Tom would get bored of him because he couldn't run around or climb trees with high M. Atticus had snuck away to Henford-on-Backley 1 to 2 times a month for over a year. He told Miss Charlene that he was going to the library. He didn't like lying to her, but he didn't want to stop seeing Tommy. Tom didn't mind in the slightest that Atticus couldn't run or climb trees. He did enough of that on his own. He would much rather sit and talk with Atticus about life, their fears, and their dreams. Atticus had never met somebody like Tommy before. He was the most forward-thinking kid. His mind works so much differently than everybody else's, but that's what Atticus loved about him. He would sometimes go into a panic about something trivial, but Atticus was very good at calming him down. Atticus would do anything for him, anything to make him smile. Tom showed Atticus the different constellations that could be seen in the sky of Henford-on-Backley. Atticus explained the mythology behind each constellation that Tommy pointed at. They complemented each other well. They talked about the future. Tom knew what was expected of him as the only child. He had to marry and continue the Barton name. Tom didn't want that. Atticus didn't want to do any of that either. Atticus suggested that instead of getting married to girls, they could simply run away together and spend time like they did once a month every day. Tommy wished life were that easy. Atticus wished it were that easy too. He would give up all of his fancy toys and house to be with Tommy. To show Tommy how much he cared about him, he gifted the other boy's favorite toy. It was the teddy bear his mummy gifted him before she passed away. He knew that Tommy would take good care of it. He told him to give the teddy a hug when he was lonely. They were both in similar situations with only having a distant father. He didn't want Tommy to feel alone when he was gone. Atticus loved every second of his time with Tommy. It was the day of the month that he cherished the most, but he hated to leave him. It broke his heart every time. Atticus realized that his feelings for Tommy were not normal friend feelings. He liked him how he was supposed to like girls. It complicated his life even more. He could never tell Tommy his feelings. He would hate him. Atticus trusted Miss Charlene to give him sound advice and to not judge him. He told his nanny that Tommy was a special friend. He blurted out that he thought Tommy was his first crush. Miss Charlene was shocked to hear that Atticus thinks he likes boys. She worried for the child, not because he was a boy who liked boys. Someone's romantic preference was their choice. She worried about how society would treat him, especially his father. Charlene thanked Atticus for trusting her enough to confide in her. She suggested that he invite Tom over so she could meet the boy. She also suggested that Atticus not tell his father about his feelings. It was their secret. Atticus thanked Miss Charlene profusely for listening with an open mind during this monumental moment in his life. He gave her a hug and tried to hold back tears. Charlene made Atticus's favorites for dinner that night. The guest of honor was Atticus's first crush, who also happens to be a boy. It was a lot for Charlene to take him, but it was her job to support Atticus for the person he was, not the person she wanted him to be. She just wanted him to be happy. Atticus sat at the table with their best placemats. He wanted Tommy to feel comfortable in their home. He hoped that Miss Charlene and his father would like him, and he would be able to have sleepovers with him. Atticus had gifted Tommy the money for the train ride the last time he saw him. He greeted his favorite person with a hug. He couldn't believe he was at his house. Atticus raved about Tommy being in Del Sol Valley. Tom admitted that Atticus's townhouse was the fanciest place he had ever been in his life. He pokes fun at Atticus's riches. Edison was in a particularly good mood that evening and decided to join for dinner to meet Atticus's first friend, He was curious what about his son did Thomas like best. Tom told Atticus's father that he liked everything about his son. He made him smile, and they laughed together often, in an effort to get Edison to like him. Tom even thanked Atticus for raising such a great kid. Edison noticed something different about Atticus as he spoke with such animation to the other boy. Edison didn't like it one bit. He would not let the child under his roof be fruity. Charlene enjoyed watching Atticus transform into a happy child as he spoke to Tommy. Edison stared daggers at Charlene and asked if they could speak downstairs as dinner concluded. Edison reprimanded Charlene for allowing this kind of disgusting, despicable behavior to stand. He would not have a pansy for a son. He forbade Charlene from allowing it to continue. Thomas was not allowed under this roof again, and Atticus was not allowed to see him again. Atticus was legally his son, and therefore his actions reflected back on him. He would not stand for it. Charlene played dumb about Atticus's crush on Tom and fought back. She stood her ground and said she would not forbid Atticus to spend time with his only friend who makes him happy. Tommy played with some of Atticus's toys while he waited for his friend to join him. He was really impressed with Atticus's home. He felt very out of place. All of Tom's nerves left his body as soon as Atticus was in the room. He put Tom at ease. He had grown up so lonely and constantly ridiculed, so he didn't know what he did to deserve having someone as sweet and lovely as Atticus in his life. Atticus's sense of humor had come a long way since meeting Tommy. Before, he was sheltered and was afraid to make jokes. Now, he made Tommy laugh so hard his stomach hurt. It was a wonder to watch. They talked about what life would look like in 5, 10, 20 years. The further they looked into the future, the more grim it looked. Their close relationship would have to take a back seat for their responsibilities. For now, they would soak up every moment. Neither Tommy nor Atticus had ever had a sleepover before. Atticus normally had trouble falling asleep, but fell asleep with such ease that night. Something about Tommy being close was comforting. Tommy also enjoyed sleeping close to Atticus. His home life was erratic, which always kept him on high alert. Tom got the most peaceful sleep he had ever had on Atticus's floor. Nellie came to the Bennett townhouse on a day that was not her scheduled work day. She had news to share with Edison, and it could not wait 3 more days. Charlene was there to greet her, and she immediately noticed the growing bump on Nellie's belly. The nanny worried that this would send Edison into a frenzy. Charlene told Nellie that Edison was upstairs in his bedroom. Nellie made her way upstairs and hoped Edison would take the news well. Edison greeted his beautiful maid, surprised that she was in his home on her day off. He noted how pretty she looked in clothes that were not her uniform. Nellie was not one to beat around the bush, so she simply tells Edison as she is with child. Edison congratulated her, not grasping that she was insinuating that he was the father. Edison says that he didn't realize that Nellie was married. She responded that she wasn't. She stated that Edison was the father of this baby and Atticus would now have a sibling. This struck a nerve with Edison because Atticus was not his son. He had also been here before. Kate made it seem as though he was the father of Atticus during her entire pregnancy, and he could not go through that again. Edison took all of those built-up insecurities and trauma over Atticus's paternity out on Nellie. He yelled at her and said she was lying. His late wife lied to him. She was probably lying to him for his money. Nellie assured him that she was not lying, other than a boy, and she was 16. Edison was the only person she had been with. She screamed back at him to pull himself together and trust her. If not, he would not be in their child's life. Edison quickly calmed down and apologized for saying hurtful things to her and not trusting her. he disclosed Atticus's true paternity for the first time. Nellie understood why Edison was the way he was much better after that. Edison felt so many emotions in the weeks following Nellie's news. In some ways, he was reliving both the excitement and devastation of Kate's pregnancy. The one thing he knew for certain was that he and Nellie could not stay in Del Sol Valley. He could not raise a mixed child with the help while in the public eye. He decided that his upcoming role would be his last. He hated to admit it to himself, but Kate and Harrison had the right idea to run away to Solani to be a happy family. He would make arrangements with Nellie. He was finally going to be a real dad, not a pretend one. He didn't want Atticus's presence to ruin his life in Solani, so restructured his finances to be able to keep Atticus and Charlene in the townhome, used and away from his new life. Nellie did not know of Edison's plan yet, so she planted false hope of a real family, a new sibling in Atticus's mind. She boasted about what their life would be like. Atticus was so excited. Nellie knew the secret of Atticus's paternity, but that didn't stop her from being kind to him. None of this was his fault, and he was the sweetest child. Charlene danced with Atticus, but did so angrily. She was disgusted by Edison and Nellie. Intimacy was meant for husband and wife, and now they were having a child out of wedlock. It also enraged her that Edison already had a child whom he spent no time with, nor did he give any warmth or love. Atticus had overheard his father speaking to Miss Charlene about he and Nellie's big move. His father had neglected to share any of this information with him. To distract himself from the pain of his father abandoning him, he wiggled his loose tooth for weeks until he was able to yank it out. In his mind, the physical pain was better than the emotional pain of his father's neglect. Nellie had moved into the townhouse while Edison prepared their travel plans. Her morning sickness in the first trimester was gruesome. Despite her terrible morning sickness, Nellie still tried to be beautiful for Edison. He was used to movie stars after all. What started out as nothing more than weekly heated fun in the bedroom together transformed into a deeper connection. Edison had fallen head over heels for Nellie. He was unsure of her feelings for him. He was clueless about whether she agreed to move to Solani because she was pregnant with his child, or because she genuinely cared for him. Edison had gotten better about communicating his feelings this time around. He frequently asked Nellie about the paternity of the child to gain that reassurance. She was kind and gracious and always answered his question. His connection with Nellie was special. It was helping him to heal the wounds and his broken heart with his marriage to Kate. Although he sometimes still had his doubts, he was excited to become a real father for the first time. He was eager to form a bond with his offspring. Unlike his very rocky relationship with Atticus, he would be a doting father to this baby. He would be warm and loving to he or she. Part of him felt guilty for giving Atticus such a lonely and cold childhood, but he wasn't capable of loving him. It just hurt too much. Edison tried to keep the romance alive with Nellie. He lost Kate to another man, and he would not have that with Nellie. He was committed and was giving up his lifelong dream of being an actor. Or at least, this is what he was telling her. In reality, his agent was dropping him and told him that the film he was about to star in would likely be his last. Nobody in Del Sol Valley wanted to work with him. Charlene was fed up with Edison and Nellie flaunting their unwed debauchery in her face. It was against everything she believed in. The only reason she didn't quit was because of Atticus. The child would be alone or treated poorly. Edison lit up a ciggy before he was to change and leave for his final day as an actor. He felt a piece of him was dying with his dream. He tried and failed. That was something to be sad about. Edison looked at the outside of the filming studio, basking in the confidence that being an actor made him feel. This part of his life was about to be over. Edison looked in the mirror as he was being fit for his costume, and he could see his age lines for the first time. The years had not been kind to him, and the public was right. He was too old to be a leading man and the city's darling. While looking over his lines, he noticed Judith Ward in a red wig also rehearsing her lines. For once, she did not look like she wanted to hurt him, so Edison engaged her in conversation. It felt good to talk to her again. That spark between them was still there too. She was giving him flirty eyes and speaking in such a way that led Edison to believe that she was still interested in him. Edison decided to go for it. He was about to be a one-woman man and a doting father. He deserved to have one last fling to signify the end of his bachelor days. And with Judith no less. Things between them felt awkward at first. It had been many years since the two were together in this way. Edison felt like an inexperienced boy in the academy again. Judith broke the tension by kissing him. Things between them escalated after that. They had a quickie in the dressing room before Edison was called to set. He studied his lines one last time. This film would be his legacy, and he didn't want the film to bomb. He wanted to make something that he could be proud of. Edison was suddenly so nervous for filming his swan song. What would the public think of him? His first scene was a song. He had been practicing his vocals for months so the director wouldn't dub over his performance again. Thankfully, his voice made the final cut. His next scene was a choreographed dance. He thought the scene unnecessary to the overall plot, but he followed the choreography strictly so he did not upset the director. Edison's final two scenes was romancing his love interest. He was uncomfortable with these scenes because it was a man dressed up as a woman for comedic effect, but he didn't know his co-star was a man until after. So that meant in his final film role, it was recorded for everyone to see that he kissed a man. This is what his son wanted for his life, and it disgusted him and only reinforced his agenda to find him a wife when he was of age. Edison smoked a ciggy as the cast and crew clapped at his performance. He had never gotten that before. He would miss the feeling he got when he was performing. He gave it all he had. Hopefully that was enough. Edison was paid handsomely for his role in the film, more than he had ever received before. His role in the film was critically acclaimed and he received a nomination. He did not receive the award, but it was an honor to be nominated. For the first time in his career, his phone rang off the hook with film offers. He turned them all down to be with Nellie and their baby. He was no longer a celebrity. Edison was finally ready to tell Atticus about the big move. Atticus, of course, already knew. Atticus reprimanded his father for abandoning him. He told Edison that he was a terrible father and person, and that was probably why his mother ended her suffering. Atticus had never been so angry before. Atticus bringing up Kate and how she passed away triggered his guilt. He got in his son's face and told him that if he ever spoke of his mother again, he would enact physical punishment on him. A week had passed since that conversation with his father, and he was still so angry. He had read his mother's letters a million times and finally realized Edison was the villain in her story. Edison lit up a ciggy as he waited for Nellie to pack her bags. He felt a myriad of emotions as he stood outside of the townhouse. He had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows here, he was about to start new with his love. It was a fresh start for both he and Nellie. He would find his next great calling in life, and Nellie no longer had to be the help. Most importantly, they would shower their child with love. Edison was so excited for the future. Edison came outside to see his father and Nellie off. He was upset and he wanted his father to see his raw emotions. After they left, Atticus sat on the ground outside of the townhouse for a long time and wept. He has always known his father didn't love him, but moving thousands of miles away solidified that Edison knew they even cared for him. Atticus fell into a deep depression after his father's departure, so much so that he even missed 2 of his monthly visits with Tommy. He didn't want to bother Tommy with his sadness over a man who didn't deserve it. After a while, Atticus wrote to Tommy. He explained his situation and apologized for standing him up twice. He wrote about how much he missed him and wanted to see him soon. Tommy sympathized with Atticus's situation, and he comforted his favorite person for feeling down. He would never tell Atticus, but he wished he had his life. He would give anything for his father to leave and never come back. Tom whispered to Atticus that at least now they would be able to hang out together at the townhouse. Tom could escape there and feel safe with Atticus. It was at this moment when they officially became best friends. This friendship brought the best out of each boy and gave them both something that they did not get at home: love and acceptance. The 2 boys waded in the water together and thought about their futures. Both would soon be aging into teenagers, which meant greater responsibility. Neither wanted to give up the time they spent together to start looking for wives. Atticus wished he could simply marry Tommy instead. Tom was correct about it being a blessing in disguise to have Edison gone. Instead of monthly visits, it turned into weekly visits, with Tommy staying the entire weekend. Atticus taught Tommy how to play chess. Tom found it to be dreadfully boring, but pushed through it because he enjoyed watching Atticus in deep concentration. One night during their sleepover, Atticus announced that he was never going to get married. When Tommy asked why, Atticus lied and said it was defiance of his father's wishes. Tommy knew his friend very well and could sense he was holding something back. He couldn't place what it was, but he secretly hoped it was the same feeling he felt when he looked at Atticus. Atticus thanked Tommy for consistently being there for him. He thanked his lucky stars every day for meeting him in the lake that day. Tommy felt the same way. His life was infinitely brighter and full of laughter and smiles with Atticus in it. He hoped they would be this close forever. Miss Charlene baked a special birthday cake for the Tabos. Tommy was a few days younger than Atticus, but wanted to celebrate him as well because she knew Tom's father would not. She didn't worry about Atticus as much this time around. He was growing into a fine young man, and more importantly, Tommy made him happy. Miss Charlene and Tommy were there to celebrate Atticus. Both individuals loved the boy so much and were excited to see what this life stage would bring. Both knew he was destined for great things. Atticus blew out his candles and wished for the courage to tell his best friend that he was in love with him. He hoped one day that wish would come true. Atticus's teenager trait is that he is stoic. This means it is rare for him to show emotions outwardly. Atticus's teenager aspiration is to have a soulmate. He obviously already had that special someone in mind, but hoped Tommy reciprocated his feelings. It was a long shot in Atticus's mind. Atticus visited Tommy after several months. Tommy's father had forced him into the workforce, so they had not seen each other for a while. Atticus had thought obsessively about sharing his feelings for Tommy during their time apart. He realized that they grew up too quickly, and he may never get the chance to share his feelings. Tommy went into great detail about his new job and all the gossip about that. Atticus tried to be a good friend and listen intently, but he was internally building up the nerve to tell his best friend he was in love with him. Without warning, Atticus blurts out that he is in love with Tommy as more than a friend, and even blows him a kiss. They are quiet for several seconds. Tommy stood up, and Atticus thought he was either going to leave or beat him up. Instead, Tom whispered to him that he shared those same feelings for Atticus and was afraid to tell him. Atticus was overcome with emotion and validation. He never in a million years thought that Tommy felt the same way, that he was also gay. He caressed the other boy's face gently, soaking up this moment. Slowly, he pressed his lips against the other boy's. It was both their first kiss, but, at least to Atticus, it was absolutely mind-blowing. He did not know a simple action could make him so happy. The two young men raced each other to the lake. Previous awkwardness and nerves now gone. They would navigate their feelings for each other together. It was them against the world. Now that Atticus had ripped the band-aid off and kissed Tommy, that was all Tommy wanted to do. He had dreamed about it for years, and now that he knew he could, he didn't want to stop. They were both over the moon. A few months later, while Atticus was in Henford on Bagley with Tommy, Miss Charlene took her last breath. She had lived a long life, and she passed away content that Atticus found happiness. She passed alone in the townhouse, and her last thought was one of worry for Atticus having to discover her. She laid there for many hours until Atticus and Tommy returned home. Atticus was utterly devastated when he walked into his home and found the woman he came to think of as his honorary mother lying there, cold to the touch. She was gone, and he would miss her so much. Tommy returned to Atticus after calling for help. He listened to Atticus as he cried and worried for what would happen to him now that his caretaker was gone. He was now alone and sure his father would not return home. Tommy comforted Atticus. This was a loss that they would mourn together. Miss Charlene was the only adult who ever showed him any kindness, and he would also miss her. After Miss Charlene was collected, the Taboos lit a fire in the master bedroom which Atticus had moved into. Tommy held Atticus's hand as he sobbed. He would be there for Atticus. He didn't care about his job. He would miss work to be there for his love. Atticus knew that Miss Charlene's time was coming, but it didn't mean it hurt unless everyone always left him. In the months following Miss Charlene's passing, Atticus began looking for work. His father hadn't sent money in weeks, and the water and power had been shut off. He needed to start providing for himself. It was a difficult time for Atticus. Tommy cut back on shifts at work and was there for him whenever he could be, but Atticus spent much of his time alone. The loneliness was really wearing on him. In his most desperate moments, he rocked in the rocking chair to feel closer to Miss Charlene. It was her favorite spot, and he swore he could still feel her with him sometimes. When Tommy was there, he suggested that Atticus try to get in touch with his emotions by doing something called meditation. He had read about it in a book. It did help Atticus feel better. Tommy focused on his art much of the time he was at the townhouse. His father discouraged his painting, so this was the only time he could express himself, both artistically and romantically. He was free with Atticus.